We kick off with a revelation that could shake the very foundations of traditional beliefs. El and Yahweh were not always perceived as the same entity. Early archaeological discoveries suggest that these two figures were once distinct deities worshipped separately by the ancient Israelites. In the heart of ancient Canaanite culture, El stands as the supreme god, a majestic patriarch, the creator, the father of both gods and humanity. He is mentioned in numerous ancient texts and inscriptions, depicted as a wise and benevolent ruler presiding over a divine council. El was the epitome of authority and compassion, revered across the region. Meanwhile, Yahweh emerges from a different backdrop. Initial references place Yahweh in the southern regions, possibly originating from areas like Edom, Midian, or Sinai. Early inscriptions and texts hint at Yahweh being a dynamic warrior or storm god, a deity associated with power, might, and the raw forces of nature. What's groundbreaking is the evidence of polytheistic practices among early Israelite communities. Inscriptions unearthed from sites like Kantilit Ajrud and Kerbet Elkom mention Yahweh and his Asherah, suggesting that Yahweh was worshipped alongside a goddess consort. This challenges the long-held notion of ancient Israelite monotheism and paints a picture of a rich, complex spiritual landscape where multiple deities were acknowledged and revered. These findings have profound implications for our understanding of biblical history. They suggest that the journey to monotheism was not a straightforward path, but a gradual evolution influenced by cultural interactions, theological debates, and societal changes. The merging of El and Yahweh into a single, all-encompassing deity could have been a strategic move to unify the people, solidify religious practices, and strengthen communal identity. This isn't just an academic curiosity, it's a revelation that prompts us to reconsider the origins of some of the world's most influential religions. It raises pivotal questions. How did these two deities become one in the eyes of the worshippers? What roles did prophets and leaders play in this theological transformation? And how does this reshape our understanding of the divine narratives that have been passed down through millennia? Let's tackle a pivotal moment that redefined ancient religious landscapes, the fusion of El and Yahweh into a single, unified deity. This wasn't just a minor theological tweak, it was a seismic shift that laid the groundwork for monotheism as we know it. Imagine a world where El, the venerable creator god of the Canaanites, coexisted with Yahweh, a dynamic and rising deity among the Israelites. These two powerful figures didn't just fade into one another overnight. Their merging was a complex process influenced by cultural exchanges, political alliances, and shifting societal needs. As the Israelites settled and interacted with neighboring cultures, they began to integrate aspects of El into their worship of Yahweh. This wasn't mere happenstance. It was a strategic amalgamation that blended the supreme authority of El with the dynamic presence of Yahweh. By adopting El's attributes, Yahweh evolved from a regional deity into the singular, all-encompassing God of Israel. This fusion served a critical purpose. It unified disparate tribes under one national identity, strengthening them against external threats and internal divisions. It also provided a theological foundation that emphasized a personal and covenantal relationship between the Israelites and their God, a relationship that was unique and exclusive. What's particularly fascinating is how this transformation is reflected in the Hebrew Bible. Early texts often reference God as El, Elohim, or El Shaddai, names rooted in the Canaanite tradition. Over time, these titles became associated exclusively with Yahweh, signaling a deliberate shift in religious narrative and practice. This wasn't just a theological merger, it was a cultural revolution. By synthesizing the grandeur of El with the fervor of Yahweh, the Israelites forged a new understanding of divinity that was both deeply personal and universally sovereign. This redefined not only their spiritual life but also their national identity and destiny. How did a people surrounded by polytheistic cultures come to embrace the worship of a single, unified deity? This wasn't a simple overnight switch, it was a complex process fueled by social upheaval, prophetic vision, and revolutionary theology. Imagine living in a time when gods were tied to specific places, nations, or natural phenomena. The ancient Near East was a tapestry of deities, each with their own domains and followers. For the Israelites, surrounded by powerful neighbors with their own pantheons, the pressure to conform was immense. Yet, amidst this, a radical idea began to take root, the belief in one supreme God who was not just another deity among many, but the only true God. Key figures in this shift were the prophets, charismatic leaders like Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Hosea, who boldly challenged the status quo. They didn't mince words when condemning idol worship and the moral corruption they associated with it. Their messages were not just spiritual, but deeply social and ethical, calling for justice, compassion, and a return to covenantal faithfulness. The geopolitical landscape played a significant role as well. Repeated invasions by Assyrian and Babylonian empires led to the destruction of the northern kingdom of Israel and the exile of Judah's elite. These cataclysmic events forced a theological crisis. Traditional beliefs couldn't explain the suffering and displacement. In response, a new understanding emerged. Perhaps these calamities were not defeats by foreign gods, but judgments from their own God, who demanded exclusive devotion. This period saw the redaction and composition of significant portions of the Hebrew Bible. Texts were reinterpreted or written to emphasize monotheism. The stories of creation, the patriarchs, and the Exodus were framed to highlight the sovereignty of one God over all nations and creation itself. The Shema, a central declaration of faith, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one," became a defining statement of identity. This theological evolution wasn't without resistance. There were tensions between traditionalists clinging to older practices and reformers pushing for monotheism. But over time, the monotheistic view prevailed, reshaping worship practices, societal laws, and cultural identity. The impact of this shift cannot be overstated. It laid the foundation for Judaism as a monotheistic faith and influenced the development of Christianity and Islam. The idea of one God became a transformative concept that would spread across continents and through centuries. Let's journey back to the heart of ancient Canaan, where the roots of El run deep and wide. El wasn't just another name in a pantheon, he was the chief deity, the father figure, the ultimate authority in Canaanite mythology. His influence permeated the spiritual and cultural fabric of the region long before the rise of Israelite identity. El was depicted as the father of years, a wise old ruler sitting enthroned, overseeing a council of gods. He was the creator, the one who set the cosmos in motion and ordained the laws of nature and society. His benevolence and justice were legendary, making him a revered figure not just among deities, but among mortals who sought order and guidance. Canaanite texts, like the Ugaritic tablets discovered in modern-day Syria, provide a treasure trove of insights into El's character and his dominion. These ancient scripts reveal stories of gods and goddesses navigating a world crafted by El's hand. He wasn't distant or detached, El was actively involved in the affairs of both gods and humans, mediating disputes and ensuring cosmic balance. The Israelites, emerging within this rich cultural milieu, couldn't help but be influenced by El's prominence. Early Israelite names like Israel and Bethel bear the mark of El, signaling a deep-seated connection. This isn't mere coincidence, it's indicative of a shared heritage and mutual religious concepts that transcended tribal boundaries. El's attributes, his wisdom, authority, and paternal care resonated with the Israelites. They saw in El qualities that reflected their own aspirations and understanding of the divine. This connection laid a foundation upon which their evolving concept of God could be built. It wasn't about copying, but about integrating and reinterpreting existing beliefs to forge a unique spiritual identity. The Canaanite influence didn't stop at mythology, it extended into rituals, symbols, and religious practices. High places, or Bamot, often associated with Canaanite worship, became sites where early Israelites offered sacrifices and sought divine favor. While later prophets would challenge and condemn these practices, their existence highlights the intertwined nature of Canaanite and Israelite religions in their formative years. Understanding El's origins isn't just an academic exercise, it's a window into how religions develop and adapt. It shows how the Israelites navigated a complex spiritual landscape, adopting and transforming elements to create a faith that was both familiar and revolutionary. El's legacy is a testament to the fluidity of religious identity and the ways in which cultural exchange shapes our deepest beliefs. Yahweh's origins likely trace back to the southern regions of the ancient Near East, areas like Edom, Midian, and the Sinai Peninsula. Early inscriptions and references outside the Hebrew Bible suggest that Yahweh may have started as a local deity associated with these territories. These regions were melting pots of cultures and ideas, which means the concept of Yahweh could have been shaped by a blend of traditions and beliefs. What sets Yahweh apart in this historical tapestry is how he rose from a local god to the primary deity of the Israelites. This wasn't merely about adopting a new figure into an existing pantheon, it was a radical shift that redefined religious and cultural identity. The Israelites were a confederation of tribes seeking unity and distinctiveness in a landscape crowded with powerful neighbors and competing deities. The elevation of Yahweh coincided with significant social and political changes. As the Israelites settled in Canaan, they were exposed to various religious practices. Yet, they gravitated toward Yahweh, possibly due to his association with themes that resonated deeply with their experiences: deliverance, covenant, and law. Yahweh wasn't just a god of storms or war, he was perceived as a personal deity who entered into a covenant with his people, offering guidance and demanding loyalty. Archaeological discoveries like the Tel Down stele provide external attestations to Yahweh's significance. This 9th century BCE inscription mentions the House of David and references to Yahweh, indicating that his worship was not only established but also recognized by neighboring cultures. Such evidence underscores the growing prominence of Yahweh in the region. The transformation wasn't without its challenges. The Hebrew Bible recounts numerous instances where prophets like Elijah and Jeremiah confronted the Israelites over their divided loyalties between Yahweh and other gods like Baal and Asherah. These confrontations highlight a period of religious tension and transition, where the exclusive worship of Yahweh was still being solidified. What truly propelled Yahweh to the forefront was the unique relationship depicted between him and the Israelites. Unlike other deities who were tied to specific locales or functions, Yahweh was portrayed as a universal God with dominion over all aspects of life and the natural world. This universalism was revolutionary. It broke the mold of localized divine figures and positioned Yahweh as a God whose influence transcended borders. The narratives of the Exodus and the giving of the law at Sinai further cemented Yahweh's role. These stories weren't just religious myths, they were foundational accounts that linked Yahweh directly to the identity and destiny of the Israelite people. By framing their national history around Yahweh's actions and commandments, the Israelites forged a powerful connection that went beyond mere worship. It became a defining element of their very existence. The emergence of Yahweh also had profound ethical implications. His laws emphasized justice, compassion, and social responsibility. This ethical dimension set Yahweh apart from many contemporary deities and contributed to a distinct moral framework that influenced not only religious practices but also societal structures. Let's uncover some of the most intriguing and often overlooked passages in the Hebrew Bible that hint at the acknowledgement of multiple deities in early Israelite religion. Take Psalm 82, for instance. It opens with, "God stands in the divine assembly, he judges among the gods." Wait a minute, God's in the plural? This psalm portrays a scene where God is presiding over a council of divine beings. These aren't metaphorical entities, they're referred to as gods, suggesting a celestial assembly akin to those found in neighboring ancient Near Eastern cultures. Then there's Deuteronomy 32 verses 8 to 9. In some translations based on the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Septuagint, it reads, "When the Most High apportioned the nations, when he divided humankind, he fixed the boundaries of the peoples according to the number of the sons of God. The Lord's portion was his people, Jacob his allotted inheritance." This passage suggests that the Most High, possibly El, assigned different nations to various divine beings, with Yahweh receiving Israel as his special possession. Consider also Genesis 1 verse 26, where God says, "Let us make mankind in our image, after our likeness." Who is the "thus" here? Traditional interpretations might say it's a majestic plural or a conversation within the Trinity, but from a historical critical perspective, it could reflect an earlier belief in a divine council. The term Elohim itself is plural in Hebrew, though often used with singular verbs when referring to the God of Israel. However, its plurality opens the door to interpretations that ancient Israelites recognized a multiplicity of divine beings before consolidating their worship exclusively to Yahweh. These textual nuances point to a period when the Israelite religion was transitioning from henotheism, worshipping one god without denying the existence of others, to strict monotheism. This evolution didn't happen overnight. It was a complex process influenced by social, political, and theological factors. Prophets like Isaiah and Jeremiah were pivotal in this shift, vehemently opposing the worship of other gods and emphasizing the sole sovereignty of Yahweh. Their messages were radical for their time, pushing against entrenched traditions and popular religious practices. What's the significance of acknowledging these passages today? It enriches our understanding of the historical and cultural context in which the Hebrew Bible was written. It shows that the path to monotheism was not straightforward but filled with debates, reforms, and revelations. By exploring these scriptures, we're not challenging the sanctity of the text but embracing its depth and complexity. We're recognizing that the faith traditions many hold dear today have been shaped by a dynamic history of ideas and beliefs. Let's delve deeper into the tangible evidence that brings ancient texts to life, the archaeological discoveries and inscriptions that illuminate the worship practices of early Israelites. One of the most significant archaeological sites is Cantilit Adjurad, an isolated settlement in the northeastern Sinai Peninsula dating back to the 8th century BCE. The walls of this site are adorned with inscriptions and drawings that have sparked considerable debate among scholars. Several inscriptions mention Yahweh of Samaria and his Asherah, and Yahweh of Teman and his Asherah. These phrases suggest that Yahweh was venerated alongside a goddess figure named Asherah, traditionally associated with El and other Canaanite deities. The depiction of Yahweh having an Asherah implies that the Israelites may have integrated aspects of Canaanite goddess worship into their religious practices. This challenges the notion that early Israelite religion was strictly monotheistic and devoid of feminine divine elements. Khirbet el-Kom, located west of Hebron in the Judean hills, is another pivotal site. Excavations in the 1960s uncovered tomb inscriptions dating to the late 8th century BCE. One of these inscriptions reads, "Blessed be Uriyahu by Yahweh, and from his enemies he saved him by his Asherah." Here again, we find a direct reference to his Asherah associated with Yahweh. This personal blessing suggests that individuals sought protection and favor through both Yahweh and Asherah, indicating that the veneration of a divine pair was part of personal religious expression. Asherah was a prominent goddess in Canaanite religion, often considered the consort of El, associated with fertility, motherhood, and the nurturing aspects of nature. Her presence in Israelite worship suggests a syncretism between Canaanite and Israelite religious practices. Artifacts such as wooden poles or carved trees, known as Asherah poles, are mentioned in the Hebrew Bible. Prophets frequently condemned their use, indicating that worship of Asherah was widespread and persistent among the Israelites despite official opposition. Further evidence comes from Tanakh, near Megiddo, where archaeologists discovered cult stands adorned with intricate iconography. These stands feature carvings of lions, cherubim, and sacred trees, symbols often associated with Asherah. While Yahweh isn't directly mentioned, the blending of these motifs suggests a fusion of worship practices. This paints a picture of a religious landscape where divine figures and symbols intermingled, reflecting a society open to incorporating diverse elements into their spiritual lives. The Elephantine Papyri, a collection of ancient Jewish manuscripts from a community in Elephantine, Egypt, dating to the 5th century BCE, provide additional context. These documents reveal that the Jewish community there acknowledged other deities alongside Yahweh. They built a temple to Yahweh that coexisted with the worship of Egyptian gods. This indicates that Jewish religious practices were not monolithic and could vary significantly based on geographic and cultural contexts. The Elephantine Jews maintained their identity while adapting to their environment, blending different religious traditions in a pragmatic approach to faith. Excavations throughout Israel have uncovered numerous figurines and amulets depicting goddesses and protective symbols. These items were likely used in household worship and personal devotion, suggesting that ordinary people sought the favor and protection of multiple divine figures in their daily lives. The widespread discovery of these artifacts indicates that polytheistic practices were deeply ingrained in the fabric of everyday life. Household shrines and personal idols tell a story of a populace that embraced a more eclectic form of spirituality than the official religious texts might suggest. The Hebrew Bible often reflects the perspectives of religious elites, priests and prophets who advocated for exclusive worship of Yahweh. However, the archaeological record reveals that popular practices were more diverse. The persistence of Asherah worship and other polytheistic elements indicates that the shift towards strict monotheism was gradual and met with resistance. This dichotomy between official doctrine and everyday practice highlights the dynamic nature of religious evolution. These discoveries have significant implications. The Israelites had a complex religious identity that included the worship of Yahweh alongside other deities, particularly female divinities like Asherah. There was a blending of Canaanite and Israelite religious practices, reflecting cultural exchanges and adaptations. The movement toward monotheism wasn't a straightforward path, but involved a dynamic process of theological development and social negotiation. This archaeological evidence challenges traditional narratives that depict ancient Israelite religion as uniformly monotheistic from its inception. It suggests that the biblical texts advocating exclusive worship of Yahweh were part of a larger effort to reform and standardize religious practices. Prophets like Hosea and Jeremiah, and reformist kings such as Hezekiah and Josiah, played crucial roles in this transition. They sought to eliminate polytheistic practices, destroy high places and Asherah poles, and centralize worship in Jerusalem. Their efforts highlight the tensions between official religion and popular practices, revealing a society in the midst of significant theological shifts. Scholars continue to debate the extent and nature of polytheism in ancient Israel. Some argue that monotheism emerged much later than traditionally thought and that earlier Israelite religion was inherently polytheistic. Others maintain that while popular practices included polytheistic elements, the core of Israelite religion was always monotheistic, with deviation seen as apostasy. This ongoing debate underscores the complexity of interpreting ancient texts and artifacts, emphasizing the importance of considering multiple perspectives when exploring historical religious practices. Engaging with this evidence requires a willingness to explore the complexities of religious development and to understand that faith traditions have evolved over time. Archaeology provides an essential counterbalance to textual studies, offering physical evidence that can confirm, clarify, or complicate our understanding of ancient texts. By examining artifacts, inscriptions, and architectural remains, we gain a more nuanced picture of how people actually lived and worshipped. The archaeological discoveries related to Yahweh, and Asherah reveal a rich tapestry of belief in ancient Israel. They show us a society in transition, grappling with questions of identity, loyalty, and the nature of the divine. These findings don't diminish the significance of Israelite religion. Instead, they enrich our understanding by highlighting its depth and diversity. They remind us that religious traditions are dynamic, shaped by historical contexts, cultural interactions, and the lived experiences of ordinary people. The story of and Yahweh isn't just about ancient gods, it's about the enduring human quest to understand the divine and our place in the universe.